all across May, we've been on this series called God-Given Purpose, right? How many of us know our God-given purpose? No, not all. In fact, I don't think most of us do. But I can tell you oftentimes what our aspirations are. And if you really have to summarize all your aspirations, and I'll show it to you, oftentimes it's this: maximizing your personal happiness. How happy can I possibly be in life? If I do this, then I'll be happy. If I do that, I'll be happy. If I do all these different things, then I'll be really happy. For some people, they want to be really intelligent. If I'm just, the smartest person in every room that I go to, then I'll feel like, I've unlocked my purpose. For some people, their aspiration in life is to find the one. And when they find the one, then they want that one to be like this trophy person. I need the trophy husband and the trophy wife, and then once we get married, then we'll have the trophy kids, and our life will be perfect on Instagram. Not in real life, but our life will be perfect on Instagram. For some people, it's money. For some, it's power. And these are good things. It's not like this is bad. But today, essentially, what we're going to be talking about is, what am I created for? And so I want to tell you up front, I'll give you a bit of a disclaimer. Not all the questions you have are found in the Bible. The answers not to everything is found in the Bible. So I'll tell you what is found in the Bible and what's not found in the Bible, just so that we can kind of settle our expectations as we jump into a sermon like this. The answers that are found in the Bible are, what are humans created for? Yeah. So us collectively, as a human race and as people, the Bible is very clear on what we are created for. Now, what David specifically is created for, man, I'm still figuring it out. So I don't expect you to be a lot further. Maybe some of you have had your nirvana moment where, you went up to the mountain, your light bulb clicked, and now you've come down and you know exactly what to do with the rest of your life from now until you die. But I'm still figuring it out for June. Yeah? So if you really want to know this, go seek God. You will not find a verse in the Bible that will, this is the verse, and now I know the plan for every single day for the rest of my life. There is no verse. If there's a verse that you particularly like, read it every day. But what is found in the Bible is, what are humans created for? But here's the good news. If we understand at a larger level what are humans created for, then within that I will find my purpose. Because your purpose will never be outside what God created all humans for, unless you're a special kind of human that's not really human. So when we look at the Bible and we understand collectively, look, God, who is the creator, made all humans. We say every child is a gift from God. And so what the Bible clearly tells us is what God's purpose was for all humans. And within that, I will find my purpose as I walk it out. But I don't know if any of us can any of you confidently say, I know exactly what the purpose of my specific life is? Anyone? No? Okay, then listen to this message. Great. Here's the passage we're going to be reading. It's a famous passage of scripture. It's from Mark chapter 12. If you have a Bible, we can go there. If not, there's one on the screen. But Mark chapter 12, verses 28 to 31. Let's read it, and you can read with me on the screen. It says, one of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked him, of all the commandments, which one is the most important? Then in verse 29, the most important one, answered Jesus, is this. And then he makes his big proclamation. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Verse 30, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second one is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. How many of you have read this passage of scripture before? Seen it, heard it, familiar with it? Let me go verse by verse, if that's okay, and just kind of talk about what it means. And then we'll jump into really what the point of this is. But let's just go verse by verse. So verse 28, it says, one of the teachers of the law came, heard them debating, and noticed that Jesus had given them a good answer. He asked him, which is the most important commandment? Think about that question. Why is that an important question? For context, there were 613 commandments in the Old Testament. So he goes to Jesus and says, look, out of the 613, which is the most important? If I have to just do one and disobey the other 612, give me just one. Why would he do that? Part of reading the Bible is also understanding the context of the society at that time. We live in an economy-first society, right? So if you go to someone and say, what's this one secret to success in life? They will usually tell you something economic related, like you should have a really good job, you should, work hard, hustle, invest early, save your money. By the time you're 30, buy a house, or whatever they tell you, because we live in an economy-first society. In the Bible times, they didn't live in an economy-first society, they lived in a religion-first society. So everything of life stemmed out of their faith. And so essentially, look, what he was asking him is, when I keep the commandments, that's my guarantee to success. The more commandments I keep, the more I earn God's favor and the more successful I am. The fewer commandments I keep, then I will have less and less favor on my life. So essentially what he went to Jesus and said, look, tell me the secret to success. Any of you have ever met a really famous or really rich person? And you go to them and you say, tell me the one thing I should do with my life. And so he went to Jesus and he said, look, what out of all the things I could possibly obey, which is the number one? What is the secret to success? Or in other words, what is the purpose of my life? If I do this one thing for the rest of my life, then I will have purpose. Then I will have favor. Then I will have success. So essentially what he asked him, which I think is a question all of us ask. We don't ask it in religious terms, where we don't go to someone and say, what's the one commandment I should keep? But all of us in our hearts are saying, what is the one thing I should be doing so that my life ends up somewhere good? And I think you will find your answer in this message. But let's go on to the next verse. In verse 29, it says this. So Jesus, before answering him, he said the most important one is this. And then he makes this random proclamation, which he says, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. That's a random thing to say before you just answer the question. But why would he say this? So let me just quickly break it down for you, because everything in this verse doesn't just apply to that guy's life, it applies to you. So essentially this is what it meant. Hear, O Israel, basically he said, look, everyone who's Israel, or listen, everyone who's a Christian. Everyone who calls himself an Israelite or a person that followed that God, or in today's context, everyone who calls himself a follower of Jesus or a Christian, then he goes on to say, the Lord our God. It's basically saying the God that we believe in is the one God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. So let me put it in 21st century English. Listen, everyone who calls himself a Christian, the God that you say you believe in, the God of the Bible, is the one God. And so essentially he's saying is, look, there is one Lord. And as people, we are invited to know him and love him. Everything starts with knowing God. You can do many things for God and yet not know him. And so he's saying is, look, the first very, very basic step to having any purpose in life is to first know your Creator and acknowledge Him as God. And until you do that, you do everything else, but there'll always be something missing. And so before he actually got to what our purpose is, or what is the greatest commandment, he's just telling everyone, look, you really need to know the one God. And so hear everyone, hear, O Israel. Suddenly it wasn't just a conversation between that guy and Jesus. He probably stood on a stool and said, listen everyone. There's one God and you have to know Him. And then he gets to the fun part. It says this. This is the most important one commandment. Love the Lord with your God. Can we read this together? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. What does this really mean? I have a little analogy to show you. The question you have to ask yourself is, how much is all? So it says all your heart, all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength. How much is all? That's the question. But stop and think about this. Does this seem impossible to do? Is this like one of those utopian Jesus moments where let's just walk on the water and I'm glad you did it, but no one else can? Here's how I typically like to represent it. You have all your mind. Let's start with all your heart. You have all your soul. You have all your mind. You have all your strength. But we don't live like this, right? You don't have your mind in one place and your heart. Maybe you do. But typically we're interconnected. So what it really looks like is all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, and there's one you. Right? You might break it into parts, but there's one you. You can divide it up later, but there is really just one you. Now it's kind of philosophical to say, right now in this moment as we sing, am I loving God with my heart or with my strength? Or am I loving Him with my mind or my soul? Are you able to tell? No, not really. So what's the point Jesus is making by giving this big list? He's basically saying, look, with everything you can possibly have, love God. Because I am an interconnected being. I have a mind, I have a heart, I have my strength, my soul, and I'm one person. And in everything I do, I have this opportunity to love God. And we have this opportunity to come to Him. But I want you to wrestle with that word all. If you have spent, if you were to take this verse in seriously, because it is the greatest commandment, it's not my words. So if you actually were to take this seriously and say, look, I do want to obey this. It says all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. Then what's left of me? God, can't I just give you half? Can't we just do 50-50? God's saying, no, give all. Practically, what would that look like? If I say to God that I love you with all of my being, everything I am, how would that reflect in the way I spend my time? There's no rule about it. But it's clear that if I never care to spend time with God, do I really love Him? Notice that He doesn't actually give rules. He just says, look, love God. And if you genuinely love Him, it'll show up in your life. For some of us, it'll show up in the way we spend our time. For some of you, it'll show up in the way you spend your money. It'll show up in the words that you speak. It'll show up in the way that you actually plan your future. Have you given any part of your future to God, or is it just all? It's all me, but Jesus, when I die, then I'll be with you. For now, it's my life. Loving God must practically look like something. The good thing is that there's not really a rule about it. When the guy went to Jesus and said, what is the greatest commandment? He was hoping for a rule, like wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and if you wake up at 6, you'll be successful. Now that's easy to follow. But love God with all your being, that's hard. You can spend the rest of your life just doing this one thing and still not perfect it. Which is why I feel highly under-equipped to preach this message. Because when it comes to this, we're all on the journey. You might think, okay, I'm really loving God with my money, but I really don't love Him with my time. And I serve in church, so I really love God with my skills and talents. But how do you speak your words on a Monday morning? God, I really want to serve you, and yet my time never reflects that. And so I have an aspiration for the future that I never actually live out each day. Let's go to the next verse. It's getting harder from here. Second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no greater commandment than these. So similarly, I want to stop and ask you, who is your neighbor that Jesus has commanded you to love? So that's really the question we should be asking. Who's our neighbor? I'm in Unit 7. So is my neighbor Unit 6? So the guy upstairs. It's easy to say, look, I love God. But now it's like, oh, but love your neighbor as yourself. Whew. Here's how I simply look at who my neighbor is. Some people define it as your flat next door. Sometimes you can say, as I'm walking on the street, I'll see someone less fortunate than me, and I'll give them 10 rupees. And then all Indians are my brothers and sisters, and I loved my neighbor. Is that what Jesus was saying? Okay, if when you're walking on the street, go and love your neighbors, and then you walk like a little Mother Teresa, and you're blessing each one as you go. And hopefully you never bump into them again, so then you don't have to do that. It's just one time only. Here's how I look at it. You might look at it differently. So this is just my view of who my neighbor is. And I invite you to consider what your view of it is. My neighbor is the first person beside me that God has put in my life, and the second person beside me, and then the third person, and the fourth person, and the fifth. And if you think about who are the closest people in your life that you have to see every single day and you spend time with, can you really love them as yourself? For me, that's Sneha. 3 in the morning. Jonathan's crying, no, you get up, no, you get up. That's hard to love. It's easy to give 10 rupees to a guy on the street. But that sibling of yours that has done it again, I can philosophically say, I'll love that person who I see once in a year, then never again. But to love him every single day and for him to love me every single day is hard. So the way I look at neighbors, who are the people in your life that will really testify? Who are the ones that will test your patience the most? Who are the ones that expect from you the most? Who are the ones that depend on you the most? For me, it's not the random person on the street. While I will try and show God's love to them and bless them if I can, it's not the neighbor that I see probably once in 6 months when we both happen to walk out of our door at the same time and we kind of just nod. It's not the person who's upstairs whose name I don't know. Do you know your neighbors' names? No. So are we all like just colossally disobeying the Bible by just not knowing our neighbors' names? And everyone that lives in an urban city is terribly disobedient. No, I think the point is, who are the people that God has put in your life that are closest to you? They depend on you, you depend on them. And are you actually willing to lay down your life and love them as yourself? Can I love Sneha as myself? And Jonathan as myself? And Lucky as myself? And you guys are easy to love because I only see you on Sunday. Like there's not that much of interdependence that we have. You message me, say, Pastor, pray for me. It's easy to pray for you. But when we're working together and like, oh, you didn't do this and you messed up and you're late and this and that and that, now can we love each other? Oh, it's so much harder. It's easy to love in church like this because we see each other next week. And we'll sing songs and we'll have dinner, and that's not really the test of your love, whether you love me and I love you back. The test of my love is whether I love her. The test of your love is whether you love the person that God has put in your life beside you. And you can sweep that off and say, oh, well, I love the guy on the street, but that's not your true neighbor. That's not really the test of your love when you think about loving with all your being. So this is ideally what it looks like when we think about this verse. Many people say, okay, I'll love myself first. And because I'm a bit of a people pleaser, I'll love everyone else, and then God will, who's God? And then some people are good Christians, they'll say, God, I love you so much, I put you first in my life. But then next comes me and these people you've given me, God, they're a pain. You don't know my brother. But what the Bible is inviting us to do is do this. God first. And love your neighbor as yourself. And these are the two most important things you could ever do in life. It's not your job, it's not what you study. It's this. But here's how I want to kind of bring this message together. When you spot this, this is the whole passage. The guy clearly went to him and said, which is the most important commandment, right? My assumption is that Jesus would give one. Why did he give two? Why did he give two answers? Think about that. The guy asked him, look, which is the most important commandment? And instead of, and if you read the Bible, you'll know that Jesus wasn't just, casual with his words. So why would he give two when the guy clearly asked him for one? So he says, look, the most important one. And then he didn't stop. Now like, okay, let's talk about it. And the second one is this. This is what it typically looks like. If this is you, me, I can say I love God with all my heart, soul, mind, strength. But this is kind of abstract. Right? God is this distant being that I read my Bible, and as I do that, I'm hoping I'm connecting to this spiritual being that I don't see. I pray and I close my eyes. Sometimes I'm wondering, is God there? Sometimes I feel His presence. I sing songs. But this is a little bit more concrete. So I can say that I do this, but who really knows? Like, I don't know if you wake up at 6 in the morning and spend time reading your Bible. I don't know. You don't know if I do that. You don't know how many hours a day I pray. I don't know how many hours a day you pray. I don't know how you're like on a Monday morning. You don't know how I'm like on a Monday morning. So this is very philosophical sometimes. But that's why God said, look, the world will know you are my disciples, not in the way that you love me, but in the way that you love other people. And so let me put it like this. Loving God is a starting point to everything. But then loving people is the end point. We're on the topic of what am I created for? What is my purpose? When you think about your life, you have the day you were born and the day you die, and it's kind of a line that looks like this. You have the start of your life, and you have the end of your life. And if your life goes in some direction that you consider good, now you have purpose. Right? And what essentially this passage is saying is, the starting point to everything we do is the fact that I love God. But if it's, how many of you have seen those planes where they take off from one airport but they don't know where they're going? And so then just keep flying around in the sky and they go back to that same airport that they took off from. Nobody ever does that. Have you ever booked a cab and put the location as the same location that you're at? Why? Because purpose requires you to go in a direction. And so, if the starting point is loving God, but you don't have any destination, then you're just kind of staying there and saying, oh, great purpose. I'll wake up every day, read my Bible, hallelujah, close my Bible. Now let me spend another 20 hours praying, and then I'll sleep for 4 hours, and then next day do that again. And is that really loving God? And so that's why Jesus immediately jumped in and said, look, and the second one, if you make that your starting point, you still need an end point in order to say that I've gone somewhere in life. And so he said, look, the second one is as important, because it's not just how you start, it's how you finish. And so the second one is slightly more concrete. I can say I love God with all my heart, but how do I really treat my neighbors? And so now I get to walk that out on a daily basis. I say, okay, God, I love you with all my heart, with all my being. And then my patience is tested. And then something happens that irritates me, and then that happens, and this inconvenience. And I have to come back to that point and say, God, do I really love you with all my heart? And now it shows in the fact that I love my neighbor. There is no purpose without two dots. Many of us have the first dot correct, but not the second dot. And so then we kind of look like this. Let me just tell you up front, one of the worst, so sorry if I'm offending some of you, one of the worst interpretations of this passage is, love my neighbor as myself, and so in order to love my neighbor, I must first love myself. Oh gosh, I absolutely do not think Jesus meant that. And it's funny how we can take a verse that so literally says, look, love God with all of your heart and love your neighbor all about as yourself. And the only interpretation I take from that is as yourself, and say, oh, I must love me. It's the stupidest thing. Anyway, but sometimes I can start off loving God, but live such a selfish life and call it self-love. And when He's actually given me a direction, I skew off the path. It's meant to go that way. And if you really want to go far in life, slight deviations can land you in a totally different place. Another plain analogy. If I have to fly from here to New York, and if I just make a 1 degree deviation, I would land up probably in Europe or somewhere else. Very, very different location from where I intended. And so what Jesus is saying is, look, you can start by saying, I love God with all my heart. But if it doesn't land in the fact that you love people, and you land in the pool of selfishness where I just want to love God for me, and my life, and my purpose, and my money, and my future, and my dreams, and my ambitions, and then you've totally missed the point. How's your love? How's your love for God? How's the love for the people that He's put in your life? And our invitation is, look, if as I love God and love people, guess what they'll turn around and do back? They love you back. Or I can say, I'm just going to love myself and love myself. And have you ever been around someone that loves themselves so much? It's very hard to love them. They have all the love that they need in their life comes from themselves. And I really don't think that's how God created us to be. So if I love God effectively, if I love my neighbor effectively, they will turn around and love me back, and I will have the love I need in my life. But the Bible strongly, let me put it like this, if the greatest commandment is to love God and love your neighbor, what is the greatest sin? Which is why Jesus says, look, you can say you love me, but if you hate your brother, you don't even know me. If that is the greatest commandment, every time I disobey that, just by way of logic, forgive me here, there's a chance that this could be the greatest disobedience. And every time I say, look, just my life, me, Jesus, just you and me, no, it's not. So here's what I want to pray for us. This is not an easy message. I'm still living this out. But I think we can if we have gone off the path, my invitation today is come back. If there's someone you need to forgive, if there is some person that you're not as loving to as you should be, the good news is I have the strength to love others because God loves me. And so every time I refuse to love others, I really struggle to feel God's love also. Because the whole purpose of Him showing me His love is so that I can show you His love in my life.